Hello and good morning, or it could be good afternoon, to your first Year 5 history lesson. My name is Mrs. Furby and I work at one of the Hamwick schools. I work at a school called Beechwood, which is in Southampton. So hello to any of you who are part of the Southampton schools. I'm going to be with you for the next 10 sessions and we are going to be learning all sorts of things to do with history, and it's going to be really, really exciting. Each session will have a different learning objective, something we're going to focus on, and we're going to go through it together. There'll be times when I ask you to stop and pause and do something, or I might ask you to think about something, but we're going to get going straight away. So this week's learning objective is I am developing my understanding of chronology, and we're going to talk a bit more about what that means. So I am so excited to be learning with you, so excited to be starting this journey with you. And we're going to be focusing on all sorts of history skills and getting you to really think critically, to really think about what you're being told and whether or not you think that's the truth or whether or not you think it's someone's opinion. And that's what we're going to be focusing on along. We're going to be learning about the Saxons, the Vikings, and particularly Alfred the Great. And if you live anywhere near Winchester, you may well have seen this statue at the bottom of the screen there, because that is in Winchester of Alfred the Great. So for today's session, you will need a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper. So I'm developing my understanding of chronology. So chronology is the key word we're going to be looking at there. And chronology means putting things in time order. So putting things in the order that they happened. So an example of that might be how you got out of bed this morning. So it might be that you woke up, that was the first thing you did. Then you had your breakfast, then you washed and cleaned your teeth, and then you got dressed. Or it might be that yours was a slightly different order to that. But chronology means the order that we do things in. Okay, so it could be that you get up, you go to school, you come home from school, you play a game, you go outside, you have your dinner, you go to bed. The order, time order. So far at school, and the thing about this is because there are so many different schools that are part of these videos, you all have studied different historical time periods. So you may well have done the Titanic, or you might have done the Egyptians, or you might have done the Victorians, or the Tudors, or the Greeks, or the Romans, but you will have all have done something different. And that's really exciting. But it's really important that you understand their chronology and what order they came in. So for example, the Egyptians were thousands of years ago. You know, they started in 3100 BC, so thousands, almost 5,000 years ago. Whereas the Titanic sank in 1912, okay, which is actually only about, it's just over 100 years from where we are now. So a lot has happened in those 7,000 years, almost 5,000 years, and we have to make sure that we understand what has changed and why it's changed. The other thing we have to think about, as well as the chronology, is the distance. So ancient Egypt is in Egypt. The Titanic sank in the Atlantic Ocean. There's 7,000 miles difference there. So that's the equivalent of going up and down Britain, about 20 times roughly, going back for that distance, driving back and forth. And it's really important to understand that things were happening different places in the world as well as different times. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to stop and pause, and that means that once I've explained it to you, you stop the video, have a think about it, and when you're ready to start, you unpause. I want you to write down all of the history topics you've studied so far at school that you can remember. Don't panic if you can't remember all of them. And I want you to put them in what you think was a chronological and time order. So which ones do you think came first, and then which ones, what came after that? So for example, you might have done World War II and the Tudors. Which came first, the Tudors or World War II? If you're not sure, ask someone in your household to see if you're right, and to give you a bit of help. If not, you can always look them up on the internet and check. And if you want to push yourself further, and it's always good to give yourself a challenge, can you work out where in the world each one took place? So where were you in the world? So like I've got my map at the bottom where I've pointed to where the ancient Greeks were and where the ancient Egyptians were. Now they were going on at the same time, but they were quite a long way apart. They were 1,500 miles apart, but they were alive at the same time. And those two different civilizations were doing their thing, were living their lives at the same time, in the same way that we are living our lives today, and there are people living their lives all around the world. It's happening at the same time. So stop and pause, give it a go. When you're ready, unpause. Okay, so we're now going to focus purely on British history, so living in Britain, okay? And that might include Wales, that might include Scotland at different parts at different times. It will and it won't. Okay, so what I want you to have a go at is your first challenge is, without us doing any more, is can you put these in order? Can you work out which of these came first? So was it prehistoric Britain? Was it the Georgian Britain? Was it Tudor Britain? Which came first? Now, it doesn't matter that you don't have the pictures. You can just write the headings down on your piece of paper. And when you've done that, unpause the video and see if you got it right. Okay, so this is the order that they came in. It was prehistoric Britain, Roman Britain, Anglo-Saxon Britain, Viking Britain, go along. Then we had medieval Britain and the Normans. Then we had Tudor Britain, Stuart Britain, Georgian Britain, all along, Victorian Britain, modern Britain, which is what we're in today, including World War I and World War II. Okay, so below here, you can see them just here. We have got some dates, and each of these dates reflect a time when this time period started. And what I want you to do is think about, and if you've got it going, you'll know that if you put them in number order, you're probably going to get it right. Okay, can you work out which of these dates goes with which of these time periods? So it might be that you remember 1066, which is a really important year, and you might be able to remember that that goes with the Normans. Okay, so can you add those for me? I'll pause the video when you're done. Brilliant. So you can see I've now added the time periods to each of my things. You can have a look and see whether you got those right. Okay, so we are currently in modern Britain, which is and we're in 2020, it might be 2021, I'm not sure. And in our time period, we include World War I and World War II. Titanic is also in our time period. But for these videos, we are going to be focusing on Anglo-Saxon Britain and Viking Britain. So we're going to be focusing on about the year 450 to the year 1066. Okay, so there's a long time period that we're going to be looking at. What I want you to do now is we're going to have a bit of a think and see if you can think, which of these time periods do you think these things belong to? So I've got you a picture here. It's of a shipwreck. It's out of the water. And I want you to see if you can work out whether you think this ship belongs to the Tudor Britain, so from the 1400s or the 1500s, prehistoric Britain, so it's over 2,000 years old, or modern Britain. Is it a modern ship that's sunk? Okay, have a guess, have a think, work it out, have a look. Okay, so it was Tudor Britain. That is the Mary Rose. Now, if I move my face out the way, there we go. The Mary Rose, for those of you who live in Portsmouth, you may well, or Southampton or everywhere else, you may well have been to the Mary Rose. Mary Rose is in Portsmouth now. It's in Portsmouth Historic Dockyard. It was Henry VIII's favourite warship, and it was named after his sister. And it was built in 1509, which is when Henry VIII came to the throne. However, in 1545, a disaster struck and the boat sank. Okay, and Henry VIII was on land and he watched it sink, and he was very sad. And if you've ever been to Southsea, you may well have been to Henry VIII's castle, which is where it said he stood and watched the boat sink. The Mary Rose sank within a matter of minutes, and hundreds of sailors lost their lives. In 1982, they discovered the wreck of the Mary Rose, and it took them a few years to preserve it, but they brought it back up out of the water. And then for about 20 years, they constantly put water on it to make it okay. And now, if I show you the picture, they've been able to take the water away, and it is in this museum, and it's got this special atmosphere, and it's quite cold when you go in there, and they're able to show you what that ship looked like, and it's really quite cool. So if you ever get a chance to go to see the Mary Rose, do it. Right, what about this one? What do you think this type, what do you think this links to? Which time period? The Romans, the Vikings, or Victorians? Have a think. Okay, ready. This was the first sewing machine, and this was part of Victorian Britain. Before this, people had to sew everything by hand. But as part of the Industrial Revolution, where we started really building machines and factories and things like that, they thought there had to be a quicker way of sewing. So somebody called Elias Howe, okay, or Elias, not sure, sped up the sewing process by creating a machine that would sew quicker. And this was the first sewing machine. Okay, let's see what's next. Right, which time period do you think this links to? Modern Britain, Georgian Britain, or Anglo-Saxon Britain? Okay, let's see. This is part of the Anglo-Saxons. This is the Sutton Hoo Anglo-Saxon helmet. So this was a very important discovery as part of in 1939, and it was part of a Saxon burial ship. So we'll learn a lot more about that. Basically, important Saxons were buried, but they were buried in a ship full of treasures and full of important things that belonged to them. And it was very exciting when we found this when this helmet was found, because it showed what the Saxons wore for fighting, what rich Saxons would have owned for their belongings, how big their heads were, all sorts of things like that. It was believed to have been buried in 625, so about 1600 years ago, and it was thought to have belonged to King Roywald of East Anglia because of how intricate the details are. It would have offered lots of protection during battle because it covers up everything and down the side, and it would have been quite tricky to hurt people. And it was found in lots and lots of little pieces. So if you look at the original one, you can see where all the different pieces were. They had to be glued back together as they found all the pieces where it had disintegrated in the ground. Okay, and it is widely thought to be the most important Anglo-Saxon discovery ever. And it's permanently on display in the British Museum in London. So if you're ever in London, go there and see it. This picture on here, this one over here, is what they think it would have looked like before he was buried. This is what they think it looked like. So this is how we found it, and this is what they thought it would have looked like. Okay, and Sutton Hoo was discovered on the east coast of the country. You can see the map in the corner, and it was really exciting. So we're now going to look at what changed. So before the Anglo-Saxons came the Romans. The Romans were were in Britain between 43 AD and 410 AD. So the Romans came from Rome, or Italy, as we know it, and they invaded Britain, and eventually they conquered and they settled and made lots of changes to what we call England, so and Wales a bit. So if you have a look at the map, you can see all the different sections that they cut it up, split it up into, called it Britannia, and things like that. The Romans gave us the start of the English language that we speak today. They gave us the solar calendar, which is what we use today, so it links to the sun. And in fact, July is named after the Roman leader Julius Caesar. They gave us the laws in our legal system. They gave us straight roads. Okay, so if you're on a road that's really straight, there's some really, really straight roads across the country. You can see on the map there where the roads are that cross the country. They gave us central heating, so they made their houses warm. They gave us concrete, very useful. Aqueducts, which is how they transported water. And new building techniques using stone and stronger materials. I mean, you can see in this picture at the bottom, this is a Roman bath. You can see the stones that is used and how strong they were. And a lot of these structures still exist today. So if you ever go to a city called Bath, which is near Bristol, you can go and see the Roman baths that are the same ones and how they use these incredible systems of water and kept it warm and all sorts. It's quite amazing. They were very organised and brought lots of progress to Britain. So lots of things changed. Things became organised. People became what they call more civilised with the Romans. Then it all changed again. The Anglo-Saxons came to Britain and they tried to invade. They came from North Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. They were all different tribes and spoke a similar language and worked together. To begin with, the Romans fought them off, but eventually the Romans left Britain and left Britain to it. They hadn't taught the people left behind how to fight, so they were fairly easily invaded by the Anglo-Saxons, and the Anglo-Saxons sort of took over in 450 AD. The Anglo-Saxons then settled in most of England and Wales, splitting up into different kingdoms, and they were all ruled by different kings in a slightly different way. Okay, so you can see this map at the bottom here where we've got Mercia, Wessex, Sussex, Kent, Essex, East Anglia, Gwenide, Defied, Gwent, Powys, and Demonia. Okay, you might recognise some of those words. We use East Anglia still today. We use Essex, we use Kent, we use Sussex still today, and they all come from the Anglo-Saxon times. So What I want you to do, and you can always go back through the video and there's some more coming after you, is I want you to draw 2 circles on a piece of paper, and this is called a Venn diagram. So I've got the example here, you can always pause the video while you draw it. And I want you to label 1 Roman, 1 Saxon, and 1 both. And as we go through the next few slides, I want you to stop the video as you do, and I want you to write in the Roman circle things that were just Roman, in the Saxon circle things that were just Saxon, and in the middle section, where it says both, things that they shared, so things that were similar between them. So let's look at an example. So settlements, houses. So we've got the information about the Roman British settlements and the Anglo-Saxon settlements. So I want you to pause the screen, read it through, and put what was similar, what was Roman, what was Saxon, and what was the same. And when you're done, unpause the video. Okay, so you should have done your settlements. Let's see what's next. Everyday life. So same process again. I want you to work out what the Romans did, what the Anglo-Saxons did, and what they both did. When you're ready, unpause the video. Okay. Do the same for women and children. There might be things that have amazed you, things you had no idea about so far, or there might be things that you knew, or who knows, you might be like surprised by how different they were, or how many things were the same, not sure. But again, pause the video, unpause when you're done. And legacy. So legacy means what they left behind. Okay, so what we still use today, their legacy. Okay, so again, do the same. What's the same? What's different? And pause when you're done. Okay, so you should have filled up that Venn diagram and be able to tell me all sorts of things that were the same and different between the Romans. What's really important is that you understand that things changed. The Romans did things one way, the Saxons did things a very different way. Now we're going to look a lot more at the Saxons and how they did things, but it's important that you understand that Roman Britain and Saxon Britain were very, very different. So today you have learned what chronology means and why it's important when we study history. You've learned a bit more about the chronology of British history and how it's split up into different time periods. We have learned that the Romans left Britain and the Saxons invaded and settled. And you've created a Venn diagram full of similarities and differences between Roman Britain and Anglo-Saxon Britain. And that you've learned that new leaders, new rulers brought change. Well done for all your hard work today. I hope you learned lots. I hope you found it interesting. And I look forward to seeing you next time. See you later.